let's talk property management. And I'm not kidding when I say this. This is one of those videos, if you stay until the end, I'll keep you out of prison. So great property management starts before you actually list a property to rent. Well, how the hell can that be done? Well, you might not know this, but there's over 100 pieces of compliance for renting out a bloody property, which is why I say to everyone, get a good lettings manager. But this video is for you in case you're thinking about self-managing. So what do you need in place? Well, let's start with the basics. You must have a signed off positive CP12 and EICR. Great, Jamie, you've stopped speaking bloody English already. Let's start again. A CP12 is a gas safety check. You will absolutely need this before you rent out a property. Now, some properties will already have them in place. However, if you're purchasing property from a homeowner that's an owner-occupier, they probably don't have it. And you need to make sure the CP12, the gas safety certificate, has been signed off and you have evidence of it. You also need an EICR, which is an electrical certificate, which again you're going to need every 5 years to be signed off. You might not think this is a big deal. The amount of people that have come to us, because we run a management company, and they've come to us and gone, oh, honestly, the electrics are absolutely fine, they're definitely up to regs, and then they haven't actually got it signed off. And then when we've gone to get a certificate on there, which isn't expensive getting the certificate, it's the works that are needed to get the certificate in the first place, it ends up failing the check. Now, you might not think it's a big deal, but if you don't have these things in place, and the worst happens, and I'm not going to go through that on YouTube, but you can imagine the worst happens, this isn't just a slap on the wrist and a fine. You can go to prison for this because something has happened on your property and you haven't done the right compliance checks. So those are the first two, the EICR and the CP12. The next thing comes when you're actually looking to advertise the property. Now, legally, you cannot, well, technically list, but even rent out a property without an up-to-date EPC, which is an Energy Performance Certificate. I hope you have got your pen and paper for the checklist, by the way. Now, legally in the UK, you must have an EPC E or higher. If you have an EPC F or a G, not really the biggest deal in the world. You can bring it up to scratch. However, you cannot legally rent it out at that period on a new tenancy. You'll also need to make sure you've got a registered tenant deposit security. So you need to register that with somebody external from yourself. You also need to give them the right to let. You need to make sure they've got the right to rent in the UK in the first place. And all of this has to happen before they move into the property. Now, it's really important that you get this done beforehand. Otherwise, you are illegally renting out the property. Now, are you going to get in a lot of trouble for that? I don't want to say no, but probably not in the grand scheme of things. Definitely the CP12 and EPC and EITR, by the way. But some of the other stuff, you might not get into a load of trouble, but here's where you will. Let's say you've got a tenant that decides, actually, I don't want to pay rent. Well, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're probably going to give them an eviction notice. Now, the thing is, giving them a Section 21 or a Section 8 notice, different types of notices, you will then likely, if they don't move out straight away, which they probably won't, you're going to need to take them to court. And the first thing the court's going to ask for is evidence that you gave them all of the right certificates and checks at the beginning before you signed their AST, the Assured Short Hold Tenancy, which is their rental agreement. And if you haven't, it will be not impossible, but bloody hard and bloody expensive to get the tenant out of your house. Now, if you're a landlord and you're watching this, you're thinking, I bloody own the place, I can do what I want. Yeah, it doesn't quite work like that. The same as some old school landlords think they can just go and knock on the door and turn up whenever they want. Nope, you are breaking the law. It is called quiet enjoyment, which you have a legal responsibility to give your tenants. Just because you own it and it's your house does not mean it is your home. The final thing you need to do before the tenant moves in is an inventory. Now, an inventory on the property is done ideally with the prospective tenant, where you're both going to sign it, and basically you're going to go around, go, here's what's included, here's what's not included, this is what the quality of it, there's no scuff marks, all of that sort of thing. And again, this is to do with the deposit. you absolutely, I'm going to tell you something landlords do in a second actually, but you definitely cannot do this legally, which I'll tell you in a sec. But when it comes to the deposit and returning the deposit to the tenant when they move out, you're going to do a checklist against the inventory. Now, you always take account of wear and tear. Obviously, somebody living in the property, that's going to happen. But let's say there's a scratch on one of the windows that's really deep, and you go, well, that's going to come out your deposit. And the tenant goes, actually, that was already there. You then need to be able to go, well, let's check the inventory that we both did together and see if that's true. Okay, and it's really, really important to do that, because otherwise they can go, nope, that was there. And if you haven't got an up-to-date inventory that you can provide your deposit protection scheme, then they will release it to the tenant. Make sure to get it. The bit that I mentioned about that's illegal, but so many landlords do this, and you can get big fines for this, is the tenant ends up moving out and they go, just take my deposit as the last month's rent. And you go, yeah, sure, why not? Just take it. No, 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 no. This is a compliance nightmare. Do not do it. Now, the rest of it is about regular checks and compliance. So you need to make sure you're checking your property regularly. I would recommend an absolute minimum of twice a year just to check in, make sure everything's okay. And I'd recommend a once a quarter communication point. I personally don't believe on a boring vanilla buy-to-let property you need to be visiting every month, anything like that. I just think that's crazy. It's their home, leave them to it. But the reason you check in with them once a quarter is I'd rather know if anything is coming up, if they're struggling with anything, if something's wrong in the property, and that comes into your maintenance, which I'll talk through in a moment. But then there's also the physical checks. Going there twice a year, number one, it makes sure they know it in advance, because you want to be turning up, having a really neat, tidy, clean property. It often tells you a lot. If you turn up to the property after you telling them there's going to be an inspection, and then you go there and it's an absolute shithole, then that is a big problem. All right, you want to be making sure they've got everything in play. Now, you might be thinking by now, bloody hell, actually, there's a huge amount of compliance here. There's a load of things that I need to do, and I've not even got to the management yet. There's a lot of things that if you don't get right, you can get into a lot of trouble. You can get sued for a load of different things because you need your health and safety up to scratch. And you might be thinking, I'll just outsource this to a great management agent. Well, this is the first time I've ever done this. We, as a management agent, we only work with internal clients. So all of our investors that come up, we build their portfolio in Yorkshire, West, North and South Yorkshire to be precise. And we've never taken it external before. But here's what we're doing. We are doing a Christmas special where we are going to save you over £300 by coming over to our agency. So if you have any number of properties, it could be one buy-to-let, it could be 20, on every single one, we will be giving you a £300 cash rebate on each property that you sign up with us. So if you got property, this deal is only up until Christmas. I'm putting a link in the comments. I'm pinning it to the top. Please get in touch. So it's not an automatic, you're on our list and that's that. You join a waiting list. We're going to decide if we want to work with you, because we're only opening this spot up to 50 people, and thousands of people watch every video on YouTube, which is amazing. But I'm really excited by this. It's the first time we've taken it external, and genuinely, if you are there and you've got property, it is across Yorkshire at the moment. We might open to other areas in the future, but if you've got property in Yorkshire, the link's in the comments. I've pinned it to the top. We've created a quick landing page on there. Click on it, fill in your details, and I look forward to having a chat. The next thing and final thing is maintenance and repairs. This is a really big deal. It's a really big deal because a happy house becomes a happy home. And if you're not looking after your house, often that behavior is triggered down. The amount of times I meet landlords where they're like, just do the bare minimum. Absolute bare minimum. It's like, that's great, but what type of tenants do you think you're going to attract? Whereas in our properties, we typically keep a tenant on average of 4.3 years. I know, very precise, right? And maybe that figure will change over time as we're in the game for 30, 40 years, but I'm pretty happy with that. And hopefully that just goes up more and more and more. And the reason for that is we get great people in the properties that want to make my house their home, and then we look after them like family members. Okay, now this doesn't mean they go, I want new lighting put out the house, and you go, no problem whatsoever. But what it does mean is when there's a bit of damage, you respond to it. If there's a bit of damp, you respond to it. If the boiler breaks down, you respond to it. And just so you know, the average property over a year gets 3 call-outs. And this is the reason why I'm talking about it. It's not a huge amount, but why it makes letting agents and management agents even more value for the sake of a small 70 quid a month to outsource all of the responsibilities for that. Now, you need to make sure you've got great trades teams, and this is not the video to go into them, but you need to check the trades teams, make sure they've got insurance. If they're going into a tenanted property, you need to make sure you've got the right risk assessment on them. So, to conclude this video and wrap it up, because I don't want to be this 20-30 minute video, is a lot of the compliance of a property actually happens before anything happens. Now, from a safety perspective, you've got your health and safety parts, doing your checks on the property, the inventory to make sure there's no cracked tiles, anything like that. You've got your CP12, your EICRs. From a compliance point of view and looking after yourself rather than the tenant, you need to make sure it's got an EPC, an Energy Performance Certificate of E or higher, and you need to make sure you've got the right to let and everything else we spoke about before getting them to sign the AST. And then your only job as a landlord, once you've owned the property, you've got the tenant in, is to make your house their home. Communication in general is what makes and breaks business, but you need to get all of these things in place and communicate regularly in writing with your tenants, and then you can probably breathe easy. You're not going to prison. And if you like the fact you're not going to prison, then you can reward me with a cheeky little subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as I said, if you have got property in Yorkshire and you want to join the waiting list and work with myself and my team here at Aspire, I've put a link in the comments, I've pinned it to the top. Fill in your details on the landing page. I cannot wait for the prospect of working together.